let's talk about the two teams here, Scott, that just missed the playoffs because of games in the final week of the season. That is the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's start with Baltimore because we were just talking about that game in the previous segment when we were breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Ravens, 8-9 record. They ultimately lose. Some magical Lamar Jackson moments against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there was plenty of magic on the other side with the Steelers. I will just say here real quick on the Steelers, I can't believe they got away with that. Scott, this was driving me nuts last night, and I was tweeting about it with John Ledyard, who's a fan of the team and has obviously followed them for a long time. The fact that it was a beautiful mix at the end of this game for Pittsburgh where Mike Tomlin just does not value these timeouts. He manages games in such a bizarre fashion where you're just treating these timeouts like they're burning a hole in his pocket. He's got to get rid of them. And then you've got that mixed with Aaron Rodgers' absolute determination to use every second of clock available pre-snap to do all his wizardry at the line of scrimmage. They're just chewing through clock. I was sitting there thinking there's no way they can't get away with this. Well, no timeouts. They got away with it because the Ravens missed a field goal. And ultimately, rookie Tyler Loop, I felt for him, man. That was a brutal moment. He misses the kick. Ravens go home. Steelers go to the postseason. So I had to get that off my chest because I could not. I was losing my mind on my couch last night as this was happening. And yet, ultimately, all that matters here is the Steelers are going to the playoffs. The Ravens are not. What is next for the Baltimore Ravens, Scott Pianowski?
I would not be shocked if Baltimore and John Harbaugh just decided we've gone as long. They're, again, much like the Steelers. They've been successful, but they haven't gone deep in a while. They obviously haven't been to the Super Bowl, despite Lamar Jackson's greatness in the last few years. This year, they won't even be in the playoffs. I wonder if Harbaugh might want to take a year off, or if the team just do something different. Coaches are not generally in professional sports meant to be long-term solutions. And if you land on one, you're lucky and it's rare, but it's a wonder. Lamar was great at the end of that game last night, but he was not the same runner this year because of multiple injuries. He obviously missed a chunk of time in the middle of the year. And then we were all talking about, okay, who's going to smash? Who's going to own the final quarter or the final third of the fantasy season? Who's going to define the fantasy playoffs? And I think we all looked at that Baltimore schedule and thought, okay, Lamar Jackson, here we go. And it never really happened. It was nice to see him have, again, those moments of Flowers popped for the 2 long touchdowns. And what a season for him. We talked about him earlier, 10.3 yards per target, which is an elite number. And this is kind of an old team. Derrick Henry, age 32 season. I don't really know why they extended Mark Andrews. I know him and Likely do different things. Likely had that wonderful catch that set up what could have been the game-winning kick, but unfortunately Loop missed. Pittsburgh's a very hard stadium to kick in. We saw Boswell miss the extra point. He's one of the best kickers in the league. I'm still shocked to see that miss. But Lamar is his late 20s now. If he doesn't have the same mobility or willingness to run, is he the same player? It's a weird inflection point for the Ravens. I'm pretty sure I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. I just felt like maybe it was their time. I wanted to pick somebody away from Kansas City. I wish I'd fully steered into a Kansas City fade. I wanted to fade them 100%. It was just so nerve-wracking with Reed, with Mahomes. Obviously, they had the season they had. But I wonder, windows don't stay open as long. Have the Lions missed their window? Have this Ravens team, has the Lamar Jackson window, where is that at? Generally, this is an infrastructure I want to bet on, but I think the first thing we have to figure out is is Harbaugh happy here? Are the Ravens happy with Harbaugh? Because I think there's a plausible chance that maybe something happens. We're taping this midday Monday. Nothing's come down yet. It's not like you've run a guy like John Harbaugh out of the building, but I just wonder at some point if maybe he's kind of sick of what's going on here. There's been stuff out there that maybe him and Lamar don't get along that great. I don't know what's true and what isn't. I'm not in the building, but I wonder, the Ravens, to me, I see a lot of old pieces on this team. I just wonder if maybe it's time to get some new blood in here and try to get this team and this organization a little bit younger.
I think that's all really well said. I was joking with the producers last night that, you usually call this game a loser leaves town type of matchup between the Steelers and the Ravens. To me, it was loser announces us and the head coach are mutually parting ways later this upcoming week bowl for this matchup here. And I don't know if that's going to happen with John Harbaugh, but there's been at least some rumors about it. There's been at least talking points. You mentioned that There's been some kind of talk about Harbaugh and Lamar's relationship, and some of the insiders are starting to leak out. Well, that's a tough. Lamar's a tough guy to manage. It's not easy behind the scenes, and you kind of once that stuff gets out there, it doesn't always mean it's true. Number one, but it always means that somebody's putting it out there. If the insiders are starting to say it, there's a reason for that. You also think about Harbaugh has been there since 2008. Like, I was in high school in 2008. Like, it's a long time ago. Like, and at some point, you can still be a great head coach, and he might be a great head coach for someone else. And by the way, he might still be a great head coach for the next couple of seasons for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know, but these are the questions I think that will be asked in that building. Like, is Todd Monken, is it time for another refresh at the offensive coordinator position? Is that good for Lamar? Defense, can you bring back Zach Orr after a really humiliating end to the season, for this Ravens defense? And I know they lost Kyle Hamilton in that game, and that might have really changed everything. Collinsworth was all over that during the broadcast, and I think that's one that he's probably right about. Hamilton is that good of a defensive player, one of the, in my opinion, 5 best defensive players in the NFL. So it's just, but these are the questions that get asked when you've run into this blocking point, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, over and over again in the playoffs. And then you have this really bizarre season with Lamar's injuries, but he wasn't at his best. I think even when he came back and he was healthier, I think bottom line is, I think they do have to have a look in the mirror moment here for this team and ask some really hard questions that I certainly don't make enough money to know the answer to.
I'm glad you mentioned Kyle Hamilton. He's the Jenga piece to this defense. You take him out and it all collapses. I think if Hamilton doesn't get hurt in that game, it's probably easy to say that Baltimore wins. Do you have the nerve to draft Derrick Henry into an age 32 season? He keeps doing it, but gravity always wins. Father Time is undefeated, all that stuff. Henry's obviously had a heavy workload, although he wasn't used that heavily early in his Tennessee career. What's the state of the union on Henry?
I mean, I'll probably have him ranked inside my top 12 next year. Overall players, how could you not? I mean, he looks great. And I don't even think that offensive line was awesome this year. Obviously, the ecosystem wasn't at its best. And, maybe he was a little bit more boom bust as a player. But, man, he was at his best once again at the end of the season here. And it's hard for me to – I just think I'm going to be one of those guys that never gets it right, with Derrick Henry in terms of when the decline happens. This is a player I'd rather be a year late than a year early on, because – a lot of our colleagues, Scott, in the industry have been about 3 to 4 to maybe 5 years too early calling the Derrick Henry decline, and I certainly don't want to be among that cohort.
Just one more comment on the Ravens. I just wonder how the fantasy marketplace is going to react. It was a bad year for vanity quarterback. Josh Allen had a great year.
Yes.
And obviously has a lot of rushing equity there, but you went down with the ship on Jackson. Jaden Daniels got hurt. All these guys winning their leagues. Oh, yeah, I took Trevor Lawrence in whatever round. I took Drake May in whatever round. I took Matthew Stafford in whatever round. And so I think next year what's going to happen is the whole market's going to wait. And it's going to be like, wait, don't I have to take Lamar now? Don't I have to take one of the better quarterbacks now? I'm curious how much the market will push up Lawrence after the season he's had. But do you have a statement on Jackson, or just kind of where vanity quarterback is, or what you're going to do? Are you going to wait next year? Just kind of, how do you feel about the quarterback position for 2026 in fantasy?
I think having one of these elite play callers is almost just as much of an unlock from a fantasy quarterback standpoint as it is to be the elite quarterback, like a Lamar Jackson, like a Josh Allen. And I don't think Todd Monken or Joe Brady, for that matter, are bad offensive coordinators by any means, but I don't think they bring as much of an edge as guys like Cohen, as guys like Ben Johnson, and even Josh McDaniels in New England. All of those guys I think were pretty significant hits in terms of those offenses going in the right direction. I think that's something I'm going to consider when taking a quarterback next year, which might means I end up taking quarterbacks later. And in terms of Lamar himself, turns 29 years old in January here in a few days, and you just start to wonder. To me, I think if I'm the Ravens, as much as I like Zay Flowers as a player, obviously I have affinity for Rashad Bateman, who had 19 freaking catches this year. Like, that's just not good enough from an outside receiver. DeAndre Hopkins at one point, he gets that target where they're not on the same page late in that game for Baltimore, and you just had that's like one moment a game. You're like, oh right, DeAndre Hopkins is on this team for whatever reason. I think they need to put a lot more around him. Like I don't think that Lamar at this point in his career can be the sun and the moon of this team, like the sun of this team where everything orbits around, like he's what it rises and sets with him. I think they have to put more around him than they've done in previous years, because I think that's where he is as a player from a physical standpoint. I mean, he certainly had some nice electric improvisational moments in this game last night and over the course of the season. And maybe he just was never fully healthy throughout the year. I'm open to that, but he doesn't look the same. Just he gets the ball in his hands and you're peeing your pants. I think it's not quite at that level for Lamar, and maybe it will be next year, but it certainly wasn't this year.
I just want to throw one more Baltimore comment out there. I don't know what it would take for Devontae Walker to play more, but this guy was targeted 8 times this year. He caught 6 of them for 136 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaged 22.7 yards a catch. About once a month, they get this guy loose for a 40-yard catch. He was kind of like the Isaac Tesla of the AFC. With Tesla, it was more the closer stuff. He scored a bunch of touchdowns. He wasn't used that much. He somehow scored 6 touchdowns, a very limited activity. I'm curious to see what they can do with him in year 2. With Baltimore, sometimes it's just a curse of having a lot of good players. I would love to see what Likely could do if they made him an every down player, or essentially an every down player. A lot of guys, just tight ends aren't going to play 100% of the snaps most of the time. But 2 guys I'm interested to draft next year is I think their arrow has to be pointing up. With Walker, maybe Hopkins doesn't come back. With Likely, again, him and Andrews do different things well, but I don't know why they're bringing Andrews back. They've made that decision. The money's been committed. It's been spent. So that is what it is. But it's just interesting that Walker had that first touchdown in that game, and it was Likely who made the big play down for. What a great throw by Lamar. What a great catch by Likely. We'd be singing hosannas to that for 20 minutes if Baltimore had won the game. But just a couple of Ravens players I'm interested, maybe when best ball season kicks in, I'd love to have them in the back end of my rosters.
Yeah, it's a good call on Tez Walker, who was a pure developmental day 3 receiver, but does have a lot of physical ability. So if that's starting to come together, maybe in year 3, certainly a player to keep in the back of your mind. Let's talk about the other team that barely missed the playoffs here. That was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who actually did win on Saturday, but their fate was sealed when the Saints lost to the Falcons. They're another team, Scott, where I actually we could take this discussion a lot of different ways that we actually don't really have time to fully unpack here, but I think this is another one that comes down to, are they going to make a change at head coach with Todd Bowles? And reportedly, I've seen people say that Bruce Arians, who's still involved in this team, like you forget about that, but he's in the front office. He's obviously pushing for his guy, Todd Bowles, to stay. I've also seen people speculate that the Glazers, who just extended Todd Bowles, would owe him, I think, $30 million if they fired him, which is something they probably don't want to do. And yet you wonder if they're just in that spot where we talked about earlier. If you don't have the play calling offensive coordinator, head coach, you're just going to be in this this is the danger of it. I think Todd Bowles is not horrendous NFL head coach by any means, but at some point you're going to strike out at that offensive coordinator spot. They hit in year 1 with Dave Canales. Year 2, Liam Cohen. They actually upgraded on Canales. The odds that you were going to do that again was 0%, and I think they've actually gotten the worst output out of the 3 from Josh Grizzard here this year, and you just wonder, are you going to get off that cycle anytime soon? Do you run it back with Grizzard? There's a lot of questions, I think, to ask about Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah, Canales was probably a B+, and Cohen probably an A, but when you're a winning team, you're not going to fire your head coach, so those guys get out of the building. Canales has been decent coach in Carolina. Obviously, we're singing all these songs for what the job Cohen has done with the Jaguars and what a fun team they are. This is an old team, though, man. I mean, Baker probably on the back 9. Godwin's going to be 30 next year. Evans is going to be 33 next year. Somebody asked us on X, and I'm curious to get your comments when I throw it back to you. What happened to Egbuka? I know there's a lot of injuries on this offense, and Bucky Irving was like the only signature running back in the first 3 rounds who really didn't return value because he was hurt. But Egbuka looked like such a fantasy right answer first half of the year, and then his production came down. Crowding was an issue, but also there had to be some performance issues there. I don't know if the coaches right now. The great news is that you're never really out of it in the NFC South. I mentioned just how chaotic and goofy and wacky and screwed up that division was and how I was here for it. I also joked a lot in the last month that they should just send the Saints to the playoffs. Right now, they're the team that would have the best chance of probably being competitive against everybody else. But it's not the way the NFL works. This is not the NCAA basketball tournament. But I'm just worried that maybe Mayfield needs a certain type of person calling the plays and kind of massaging his game. And I don't know that Grissard was that right answer. Just how many times can you get that OC position right? Worried about the age of some of the pieces on offense and the identity here. The defense, of course, kind of fell apart in the middle of the season too. They'll still be in the hunt. They'll probably be in playoff contention deep into December next year because there's just nobody is built to run away with this division. Nobody's going to win 12 games next year. But I'm afraid that maybe they missed their window. It was just fun to see Baker back in the NFL and relevant. And he had the 41 touchdowns last year. We all knew that was going to regress. And then he gets off to the great start, a couple of comeback wins, but it all felt like fool's gold, and it's since collapsed. I'm just nervous. It's time to stop drafting Mike Evans. He's been good for so many years. He finally doesn't make it to 1,000 this year. Injuries played a big role in that. Godwin, for a lot of the year, looked compromised. Obviously, he missed a significant chunk of time, too. I'm just worried about the ages here. Remember Washington, the oldest team in the NFL in like 15 years, how they fell apart this season. I'm just worried that maybe the Buccaneers have a similar collapse risk for 2026.
I think they're definitely that potential risk there. There's a lot to unpack with Tampa Bay that, again, we can't really do in this space because there's a lot of questions to answer, too. Like you mentioned Mike Evans. At one point in the first half of the season, the way he was talking, I thought he might retire at the end of the year because he's 32 years old. He's obviously he's injured all the time now at this point. His contract is up with Tampa Bay this offseason. I can't imagine he plays for another team. Maybe I'm wrong about that and he wants to give it one go in, friggin' Buffalo or Kansas City or something like that. He wants to go to Baltimore. They love to get a receiver at the last on their last legs there in Baltimore. So maybe that's what he wants to do. I don't know. But to me, he seems like a Bucs lifer. But do you really want to go out on this note, missing the playoffs at 8-9, where it was all these injuries? I'm not sure about that. It's obviously a Mike Evans decision, but he's had a fantastic career. That's a question we need to answer because you mentioned the Egbuka thing. It was a big talking point in the last 2 weeks of the fantasy season, week 16, week 17. Oh, Jalen McMillan running more routes than Emeka Egbuka. That actually didn't happen in week 18. Egbuka ran the second most routes on the team behind Mike Evans, but big whoop. He had 1 catch for 8 yards. Chris Godwin also 1 catch for 8 yards on 16 routes. Jalen McMillan, 16 routes, 1 catch for 11 yards. It just was like there's so many. Sometimes crowding is great, but it felt like this team didn't know what to do once they actually got all of the guys back. And, Egbuka's fall off as a fantasy player directly falls off when directly lines up with Baker Mayfield's fall off. And I think Baker is a starting NFL quarterback, but we know he's streaky. We know he's a product of his environment. The environment was worse this year. And even when he started really hot, Scott, a lot of it is stuff that was going to regress anyways, whether you want to look at turnover-worthy plays, stuff like that. And sometimes streaky players, they go like this week to week, up, down, up, down. Sometimes they have great months, down months. Sometimes they have like the Kirk Cousins thing, right? He would always have these awesome, Novembers or Decembers or whatever, but he would have a terrible start to the season. For Baker, it was just first half of the year, great. Back half of the year, not so great. And that obviously impacted everybody on this offense. And I don't know if that's going to change if they run it back with Grissard or, who's the play caller that comes in and saves this team? I don't even see that in this cycle necessarily.
And remember what Bucky Irving was doing to his fantasy managers at the end of the year where he wasn't the goal line back. That was Tucker. He wasn't the receiving back. That was Rachaad White. So if you rostered Bucky Irving, you were needing him to score a 15-yard touchdown because he just wasn't going to get home any other way. And so that became three-headed monster. Yeah, we can live with 2 running backs in fantasy. When you have the third running back, it sets up chaos and kind of torpedo Irving in addition to the injuries in 25.
So it's such a great point. At one point in the offseason, certainly, although we had some skepticism about them losing Liam Cohen, but in the offseason, you look at the depth chart, it's like, man, how many pieces of this Bucs offense can I get? In the first half of the year, it's like, man, imagine when they're healthy. And then when everybody was back at the end of the year, it became a fantasy complete wasteland because you couldn't really trust anybody. And my trust level on this Tampa Bay team is pretty low right now. Again, just last point on this. I know the Panthers have made the playoffs. They've let's be honest, they fell ass backwards into the NFL postseason. However, it's still a season of progress for Carolina. For them to be 8-9 and fall into the playoffs, it's a season of a step back for Tampa Bay, even if they had made the playoffs and they were the ones that fell backwards into it. So that's just, I think, the state of the very weird NFC South right now.